The Indian government is getting out of the economy.
Delhi School of Economics was probably one of the premier faculties anywhere in the world.
In fact, international development is primarily a field designed around trying to solve a particular problem in a particular place in a particular time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Counterpoint editor Zafar Sobhan. I'm here with David Engerman, Yale University professor, and we're talking, David, about your book, Apostles of Development, which you have written about 6 South Asian economists, if not crossed swords when they were at Cambridge University in the 1950s, and then they went on to their home countries, which is, in this case, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and really played a significant role in the development of these post-colonial societies and economies. So, let's start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you come across this story?
Well, I was very interested in writing a history of international development, so had studied together at Cambridge, but then did a little more digging and found that there were 6 South Asians who were all there in Cambridge for the undergraduate degree, the economics tripos, between 1953 and 57. And I could tell this remarkably broad part of the story through their lives and their work. And it took place not only in their home countries, but in efforts to draw together South Asia as a region, and also took place in most of the major venues in which international development operate, with the World Bank, the UN, and academic life as well.
Yeah. When did you realize that you had a book here, and that centering this narrative around these 6 personalities was actually something which could turn into a book?
I had been interested in the book when was looking at a broader set of characters, so we've included 2 from South Asia, but 3 from elsewhere across the globe, the South.
Yeah.
But I was having lunch with one of my colleagues, Professor Robert Day, in December 2019, I think, and was complaining to him that I could never come up with an explanation of why these particular figures. And then we talked a little more and realized that it was actually quite easy to base it in the 6 of them having a similar experience. They were near age mates. They were all born between 1932 and 36. They all came of age as South Asian nations grew out of the empire, became independent, and then when I started tracking their careers, I realized that I could touch on so many different questions and so many different institutions just through their own lives. That's when I felt that in the book. I spent the next year speaking with people, actually. This was in 2021.
Yeah.
No one was going anywhere.
So you had plenty of time to talk, yeah.
We had time to talk to people, and more importantly, people I wanted to talk to.
When it comes to people reading this book, of course, it works as a economic history, it works as a history of development, it works as a history of South Asia's post-colonial sort of trials and tribulations and what have you. But is there a specific angle or a specific thesis which you would like to put forth, which you think people should get from this when they read it?
Yes, I guess I would say there were 2. So one of them, as I alluded to, was an effort to recenter international development as a Global South project. And then the second point, I think, is relating to that, which is that international development is a field that in which practice precedes theory. In fact, international development is primarily a field designed around trying to solve a particular problem in a particular place in a particular time.
Yes, yeah. And do you think, and that's the message, to the extent that you can say the book has a unifying message or theme?
That is the message of the book.
Yeah.
Why I dwell so much, for the reason I tell the economic histories of these 4 colonies turned independent nations, because I want to situate the ideas in the specific context from the specific problem.
Of course, the irony here is that, of course, is the locus for this was Cambridge University. Of course, if you wanted to have this kind of an education, that you had to go to a place like Cambridge. And I think what was important is that all of these 6 went to Cambridge, but then, of course, they returned to their home countries.
Well, the other part is, when I began the project, I imagined Cambridge playing a greater role in their intellectual development.
Yeah.
I've actually moved away from that a little bit.
Is it? Okay.
And one of the things I write about described going to Cambridge as a letdown after being at presidency.
But you mentioned that in the book, yeah.
Yes, I think there he means that, among other things, that Cambridge economics in those years had the allergy to mathematics.
Right.
At a moment that the field is becoming more mathematical. So if you watch more mathematical economics at presidency than
Yeah.
you could ever have learned at Cambridge.
Right.
He also tells a story of walking to the first day of class in October 1953 with another of the six, Pakistan Trouble and having a conversation of why they need to study this conventional economics. As Sen recounts it, Haq said, "Why? Who cares about determining the price of a tube of toothpaste?"
Yeah.
But then Haq goes on to say that it's really important that we learn all this. We shouldn't just take it too seriously.
No, I think, and you write this in your book, when Amartya Sen and Jagdish Bhagwati and Manmohan Singh were all together, I think, at the Delhi School of Economics. One of the things which was the animating principle behind what they wanted to do was to Indianize the curriculum and say, look, we're going to study economics, and of course you have to study neoclassical economics, there's no doubt about that, but we need to then ground the economic education we are giving to our students in Indian economics or subcontinental economics or South economics.
I think they carried this in different ways throughout their careers as teachers, as scholars, as government officials.
Yeah. It's interesting that, of course, at one point you could have made the argument that the Delhi School of Economics was probably one of the premier faculties anywhere in the world.
I think that's certainly true in the 60s.
In the 60s, yeah.
In outflow, Jagdish Bhagwati left it in 68,
Yeah.
Sen in 71, Manmohan Singh also around then.
Yeah.
There's an outflow as well, but the people who were there, students and faculty alike, would look at the 1960s
Yeah.
at the D School as they kept on using astronomical metaphors. It was a galaxy of stars.
Yeah.
And I think it had this intellectual energy,
Yeah.
both learning cutting edge economics and being in a place to abide that mattered. The D School was
Yeah.
specifically to bring economic expertise into Delhi to
Yeah.
make sure it became part of.
And what's interesting is, of course, it was this center of economic excellence. And certainly, actually, I remember for Professor Sobhan in Dhaka University, that he was instrumental in really sort of working with Nurul Islam, who you allude to in this book, though he's not one of the six apostles. In really sort of developing the study of economics at Dhaka University. And of course, there was a time when these schools were really very, very good universities. Sadly, I would have to say, looking at it from a Bangladeshi perspective, Dhaka University is not the institution it was in the 1960s. Perhaps the Delhi School isn't either, I'm not sure. But things seem to have changed a little.
Well, the beauty of being a historian, I can look at them in their glory days.
Sure.
And then move past.
Yeah.
I think there too, at Dhaka University, the group of economists that Professor Sobhan and Professor Islam were part of were really determined to bring cutting edge economics from the global north.
Yeah.
Also to situate it to their own particular conditions,
Yeah.
not just to Pakistan, but of East Pakistan.
Yes, very much so. But it is interesting that what you have here at root is this absolute conviction that you can better the lives of your fellow countrymen and women through economics. That economics is not but is in fact the weapon or the tool to be used to make people's lives better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's telling that Professor Sobhan opens up his memoir with the Yeats quote of
Yeah.
bliss it is to be alive,
Yes.
but to be young
Was pure bliss.
your hat.
Yeah, heaven. That's right.
And the sense of and actually he doesn't put this, but the poem goes on to talk about the world being plastic, which I take was written in the early 19th century, does not mean cheap and throwaway.
No.
Plastic means
Malleable. Exactly. Yeah.
a human has.
Yes.
Singular. The idea that the fundamental problem of postcolonial state after independence
Yeah.
was a sign of economic
Yeah.
sufficiency.
Yeah.
Poorly defined, but very important term in all four of the
Yeah.
South Asian countries.
And it's interesting. So even like someone like Mehboob Haq, for instance, so he did not, stop me if I'm wrong, did he ever teach at a university, or did he move straight into?
Technically, he taught at the World Bank's Economic Development Institute.
Right. So that's
Right after
Yeah.
the 22 Family speech, but
right.
essentially he was a career policy.
policy. But again, he would say that, you know, I just went straight to where the action was, because the idea being that he thought that economics could be the tool for moving Pakistan from where it was in 1947 all the way, you know, into the modern world, was presumably his theory on that.
That even Dr. Sen, Professor Sen, who was wary, I think, of direct involvement.
Yeah.
There's this line about his presidency classmate Sukumar Chakravarti, which also applies to Sen as well. This fervent belief that studying economics was a way to improve the world.
It's so interesting to me. This is slightly off topic, but I mean, there's this marvelous line in A Suitable Boy, written by Vikram Seth. It's this novel set in early 1950s India, where one of the characters is thinking of becoming an economist, and a very outspoken sort of auntie is saying, "Oh, really? I can't think of a single decent human being who's an economist." You know, and I think a lot of people thought that. They're like, what sort of thing to do with your life is that?
Well, that's also particularly ironic because being set in Calcutta,
yes,
of course, is the home to generations of brilliant Indian economists.
That's right.
Dating back to the late 19th
century, indeed.
To today.
Yeah.
Abhijit Banerjee.
Of course, yeah. We still...
Example, right? The Calcutta has a particular tradition of world-class economists.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But... tell me a little bit about Indian, Pakistani, and of course Bangladeshi economists discussed here. I know a little bit less about Lal Jayawardene. Tell me a little bit about him in Sri Lanka, and how he plays into the story, and what perhaps his relationship was with the other five.
Well, he knew Lal Jayawardene knew the other five, and was quite close with Amartya Sen in particular.
Yeah.
He, I think, had a career that was mostly in policy.
Yeah.
But in some ways wasn't a perfect temperamental match for serving as a junior economist. So one of the things I found particularly interesting about him, perhaps derived from the situation of Ceylon/Sri Lanka, which is a country which, upon independence, was still determined to maintain an export orientation, unlike India, which what Singh called export fatalism or essence. So he worked at the UN Council on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, which is a very important organization, especially in the 1960s when he was there, and was very interested in the relationship between trade and development. So he's an important figure because I think Sri Lanka is an important distinct case from India and Pakistan.
Right. And you would suggest that he was quite a crucial player in the decisions that they made in terms of the development journey.
He was one of many important players, but he also, by dint of his long career there, he brought about the first plan in the early 70s, working for the Trotskyist foreign minister Anna Pereira, and then was active in the liberalization of 1977 under Treasury Finance Minister Rodney DeMel, which basically reversed the plan that he had done.
Okay.
He then, I think, reached a kind of peak in the late 1980s when he was the founding director of a UN think tank, basically, on development economics, where he really had a chance to shape the institute and the field, the broader field. Yeah.
Of course, for many people, I think they'd be most familiar in terms of these the economists you discussed with Amartya Sen and maybe Jagdish Bhagwati, and of course they're quite famous. I think I don't know whether I'd call it an adversarial relationship, but certainly they've sort of crossed swords intellectually over the years. You've written quite a bit about this, and I think you say your sense is that the differences between them ideologically and in terms of their positions are perhaps overblown. And but talk a little bit about that.
They were hired at the Delhi School in the same year, in the 1960s, and so spent another 5 years there. It was a little hard for me to unpack more recent rivalries, and to learn more about how they actually interacted in the 1960s. But I get the sense that they, certainly by the time Professor Sen wins the Nobel Prize in 1998, the stage is set for some degree of tension. Professor Sen may have written the argumentative.
but you've come across few more argumentative people than Jagdish Bhagwati. That's true. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they tended to overstate the differences.
Right. I mean, there's in the popular perception, such as it is, among people who sort of follow these things, but not people who are perhaps, so into the actual economics of it. You kind of think of, Amartya on the left, Jagdish Bharpati on the right, sort of Manmohan Singh kind of, splitting the difference between the two. I mean, I think that how much truth do you think there is to that sort of popular perception of the three of those?
Dr. Singh is actually a little hard to discern in here because he
Right.
so much of his career working for others.
Right.
Right? Professor Sena Bhagwati, professors, mostly spoke only for themselves.
Yeah.
Dr. Singh is working at the Ministry of Finance,
Sure.
Planning Commission,
Yeah.
heads the Reserve Bank and Planning Commission, but still working in especially Planning Commission, political environment. It's clear that he's always more interested in trade as things in development. He uses his Oxford dissertation, and it was, you can see even in the sort of leftist moments of Indira Gandhi's prime minister, so in the early 70s, that he's trying to advocate for less of a government footprint in the economy writ large. So there is a truth to it, and I think it's possible to overstate. And one of the ways I think of this is Professor Sen's assessment of the 91 reforms, which Professor Bhagwati is celebrating in India as liberation of Asia.
Sure.
He says, well, he's glad that the Indian government is getting out of the economy in parts that it shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But he now hopes that it will get more involved in the parts of the economy that it should be.
And
I think that shows a certain acceptance of a kind of market orientation, but also the determination that the country could only be as good as it was treating its poorest citizens.
Yeah, sure. No, the thing is, the two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, you can say, we shouldn't necessarily be doing massive industrial policy, but at the same time, we certainly should have a social safety net. We certainly should be doing more in terms of health and education. The two things do,
and then the question is, when do you want economic growth? Is that growth necessary for development, or is...
But the sequencing question, exactly, yeah.
I think Mahbub al-Haq had who actually was quite good with turns of phrase, had a nice line about this. He says, well, without growth, you can only redistribute profit.
Right.
So if the question of growth versus redistribution is at both hands, not an either.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think exactly with much in this world, perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Of course, the other interesting relationship here when we talk about is, again, that one between Mahbub al-Haq and Professor Sobhan, because of course they both faced off in the 1960s on the issue of East Pakistan regional autonomy, and talk a little bit about that and how you address that in your book.
They're involved in this in the late 60s, but I think really one needs to start with Mahbub al-Haq's dissertation, a Yale dissertation, that becomes his first book, Strategies of Economic Planning, where he is really quite fervent that the most important element is growth. And at some sacrifice. A brutal and sordid process, he called it, although Professor Sobhan believes that he actually uttered that phrase not as praise but as criticism. And so the economic plans for Pakistan writ large at that point involved around where growth could be gained most quickly, and the argument was not endorsing it, but the argument was in West Pakistan, Punjab in particular, was best suited for rapid industrialization, therefore should get the bulk of development attention of resources. And so the debate became one over regional parity between the two wings, East Pakistan, now obviously Bangladesh, and West Pakistan. The solution was to continue investing in West Pakistan. The East Pakistan would eventually be followed. Professor Sobhan and others were arguing for parity. So before there was a call for independent Bangladesh, there's a call for more economic autonomy. And that is the nub of the difference.
There's always seemed to me that, of course, that there are actually two arguments going on in parallel. One is the growth versus where the poverty alleviation argument, or the other was the fact that because of the unique geography of Pakistan prior to partition, prior to independence of Bangladesh, that, that even if in other circumstances, you could have trickle-down economics, you could call it, it would eventually trickle down because of the nature of Pakistan as a nation. That certainly would have never happened. It would never have trickled down from Punjab to Bengal.
And it seems that it's separated by almost 2,000 kilometers. It's in a context in which every economic dispute is likely to be supercharged, as in fact they were.
Yeah. The interesting thing, of course, if you look at them, most people would perhaps think that the most influential of the six would be Manmohan Singh, because he, of course, ended up serving as Prime Minister of India, and of course, before that, he was a key player in the liberalization of the Indian economy under Narasimha Rao in the early 1990s. But would you share that assessment, you think?
Well, if you're looking in the policy sphere, then yes.
Yeah.
One of the things, and this is not something I address directly, so I'm particularly glad you asked about it, is I think there are lots of different ways of influence.
Sure.
I mean, there are certainly more articles written about Professor Sen's work than the other.
True.
And I think one of the things I would say about this is that the six of them represented multiple models.
Were you able to meet all six, or were some of them, had they passed away by the time you started? Yes. Yeah.
And Raja Warden in 2004.
Okay.
So I never got to meet them, although I did speak with the widows of both and with family members. And I had a memorable, really one of the things that crystallized this as a book for me was speaking to to Dr. Singh for 2.5 or 3 hours in 2017.
Okay, so you did manage to meet him and discuss this. Okay. But he passed away just quite recently, I feel. Yeah, less than a year ago. Yeah. And it is interesting because, of course, again, speaking with people like Professor Sobhan, my father, he said that, if he always imagined that Manmohan Singh was the least political of all of them. You see, and he would have said that maybe Mahbub ul-Haq was the most political, but Manmohan was the one who ended up as Prime Minister.
Yes, that is an irony that others have pointed to as well.
Yeah.
I think...
do you find that's a fair summation based on your
well, some would say that...
interaction with him?
With the exception that I actually think Professor Sobhan himself was among the most political.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, in a policy realm, yes, Singh is probably the most influential policy realm, but is there a distinction between politics and policy? I think Professor Sobhan's career would suggest yes, that his activism in the 6 Points Declaration and the Awami League platform in the year in 1971 itself, and he waged the International Front in the Freedom War. It's hard to say that that's not political as well.
Yeah. No, the interesting thing about both Professor Sobhan and, let's say, Professor Sen is that since, in certainly in recent decades, they have, they talk a lot about morality in terms of what makes a moral country, what makes a moral economy. And I think that too has its impact. It might not necessarily move policy, economic policy. Governments may not have much ability to do much about it, but I think it does move the national conversation on these issues. And in the case of Amartya Sen, the international conversation, he really has started sort of address these issues, I think.
And Jagdish Prabhati too. He's involved in two very successful projects making case for trade-led development. Producing one book with his wife Padma Desai, another with his colleague and friend Tian Srinivasan, and the second project he co-led it with Ann Kruger, who later to become chief economist at the World Bank. Really making it both an empirical and a policy/political case for trade liberalization, but
also a philosophical case, you could say. We're really talking beyond sort of the ideology of what works and what doesn't. There's an underpinning moral argument, at least insofar as he sees it, I think.
Yes, certainly when he's talking about the liberation of India.
Right.
He's talking about more than a few policy tools.
Exactly. Well, David, this has been a fantastic discussion. I wish we had more time, but much congratulations. I think this is going to be a book which is going to be very widely read, certainly in South Asia, but my suspicion is that there are going to be people all over the world who are going to be very interested in what you have to say here, the story you have to tell, and I think it's a story which really needed telling. So thank you very much.